let's start at the beginning. You grew up in California. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that shaped you as a person and a player going forward?
Yeah, man, I'm a Bay Area product, born and raised in Oakland, California. Came from a pretty big family, 5 brothers and 1 sister. I'm the youngest in the family. Growing up in Oakland was, back in the 70s and the 80s, Oakland was a pretty tough place. So, my father and my mother were very, very old school, very, very hardworking people. And so that really was a part of my upbringing of just understanding some work habits and understanding accountability and discipline. And as a young child, man, I was put into the fire early of learning how to clean the house, take out the garbage, do the dishes. And I think those little things really transferred over into my life as a basketball player and a coach. Growing up in California, man, it gave me a lot of diversity in my life. I grew up around all kind of different races. In my neighborhood, predominantly when I was growing up, was Black, Mexican, but then my family moved out to an area called Union City, and I was around a lot of Spanish. I was around Filipinos. I was around a lot of different people from the Asian culture, from the Latino culture, blacks, whites, and so just being able to grow up around all kinds of different backgrounds was really good for me to be able to learn about different cultures. And I'm thankful for my upbringing in California. What we call the West Coast is the best coast. You get that good weather out there. So being a California kid has definitely been a blessing in my life.
And what was it that ignited your passion for the game? Like, you had that hard work from your parents. When did you start putting that into the game of basketball? What started that?
That's a great question. My brothers, all of my older brothers, they all played. And so being the youngest, I wanted to be like my brothers.
Yeah, that competitiveness with those brothers from the jump.
Yeah, so my closest brother was 7 years older than me. So, I was a little one compared to the rest. But just watching them, growing up, watching them be a part of basketball, all I really wanted to do was just follow in their footsteps. So my oldest brother, my closest brother, CO Jr., he would take me to the park with him all the time. Wherever he'd go play basketball, he would take me. And so I just kind of naturally, grew a love for the game by watching him, and whatever he was doing, I just wanted to do. And so as I got bigger, he spent a lot of time with me, teaching me the game and trying to help me understand the game. He was my first coach. And it eventually just came a point to where, as I got older, my goal in life was just to beat him in one-on-one. And so that's kind of where that competitive fire came from. Being the youngest and, being a kid in the family that was always picked on, so to speak. I had to find a way to be tough.
Yeah, you had that hunger.
You had to. I had to, I wouldn't survive.
Right. So from there you go to JUCO and then to the University of Hawaii. What was that experience like, and what enabled you to be successful at that NCAA level?
Yeah, I think growing up, I was a late bloomer when it came to basketball. I wasn't a top high school basketball player. I was one of those kids that really, I don't think I really blossomed until I became a junior and senior in high school. And then after high school, that's when the game kind of took off for me. I had a lot of things that were, I want to call them enablers as I was growing up. I had a lot of religious beliefs that didn't allow me to play on certain nights. So I wasn't able to participate like most kids in high school basketball. And I really didn't start playing full time until college. And once I was able to dive into it full time and fully commit to it, that's when my game took off. Yeah, you can see the trajectory of just putting in the time, on a daily basis with practice and working on my game and being able to be around the game every day. And it just kind of morphed for me. Again, being a late bloomer, I had all these colleges recruit me, and I ended up going to University of Hawaii, which was kind of like a happenstance. But who complains about going to school in Hawaii?
Yeah, not a bad place.
It's a great place. And so for me, that competitive edge, it really started to kick in once I understood and felt that I was good enough to play at that level. Then I really started to take the game even more serious.
From there, you played NBA, CBA, and then internationally. Can Can you tell us a bit about that experience? What were some of the highs and what were some of the challenges you faced?
Yeah.
It's quite a varied career, right? A lot of different countries.
Man, I think I couldn't even sit here and tell you that thought I would have had a professional career. You know, I went through college when I was in Hawaii. I knew I wanted to play. I knew I loved the game, but I wasn't quite sure if I was good enough to play at the next level. Mm-hmm. You know, so when I left school and I had an opportunity to try out for the Warriors, which is my hometown team, that's when things kind of really changed for me. Like, man, okay, the Warriors, they want to invite me in for a tryout, a workout. Am I really good enough to play at this level? And so, you know, my first day there, they had a mini camp for a bunch of undrafted players, free agents, rookies, and they picked like 25 of us. And they said, hey, you know, we want you guys to come in and work out for 3 days, and then we're gonna pick a couple guys to come to training camp with us. And man, I went for those 3 days. I left everything on the floor. I mean, I left it all on the floor, not really knowing what was going to happen. And I was one of those 2 guys that got picked to come to training camp. And that was kind of like the start for me of saying, okay, I'm good enough. I'm good enough to compete with these guys and play at this level. And then my mind started to change. You know, I became a lot more confident in my own skills, a lot more confident in my own ability. And the Golden State Warriors, that first opportunity, man, being able to put on an NBA jersey in my hometown was probably the pinnacle. That was the pinnacle of everything for me. I grew up watching Chris Mullin, Tim Hardaway, Latrell Sprewell, you know, Mitch Richmond, all of those guys. And so to be able to put on a uniform and be next to those guys, man, it was an amazing experience. The NBA for me was a learning curve of just learning about pro basketball, the business of basketball and what it takes to be a pro. So when I left, you know, the Warriors, I spent some time with the Portland Trail Blazers. I spent some time with the Seattle Supersonics back at the time. And then I played in the CBA for a little bit. And I think in the CBA was really where I made my bones as a player, because that was a tough league. You know, there's a lot of guys that wanted to be in the NBA.
Everybody's fighting to get that contract,
man,
right?
The CBA was
it wasn't what the G League is now.
Right.
It wasn't the same.
Right.
So everybody's in there
for sure. It was, you know, that was a grown man's league. You know, there was a lot of grown men in that league, and so it was a tough league in small cities, and you had to really. It was a dogfight every night. So if you were in the CBA, you really loved the game. You know, you were trying to figure out what the next step for your career was. So that was good for me to go through that. And the CBA just kind of led me into this place of, well, man, I really want to play pro basketball, but I've done the NBA. I kind of achieved that. I don't really want to chase that for the rest of my career. I want to play. I love the game of basketball. And so I had my first opportunity to go play overseas in France. And when I went overseas that first year, it just opened my eyes up to a whole nother world of basketball. I was not very familiar with international basketball, so you know, I went to France, I went to Germany, I went to Italy, I went to Spain, I went to England, I went to Israel, and then ultimately I retired here in Australia. And that was kind of like the last 3 years of my career, man, and I thoroughly enjoyed every part of being able to travel the world, meet different people, learn different cultures, and just, you know, live the life of a basketball player.
And what was your experience like here in Australia? And how did you find the game and the way it's played here differs from your American style and your European style?
Man, when I was here in Australia, that was back in, that was 2000 to 2003, I believe. Mm-hmm. The league here was tough. It was one of the toughest leagues I played in. And I loved the league because it was very close to the NBA style of play. You know, they really tried to mirror the NBA in style of play as much as they could. And I just love the fact that the Australian players were just super competitive. They were tough. And this league was really tough. I mean, when I was here, you know, Andrew Gaze was still playing. You know, Leonard Copeland, you know, D-Mac, Shane Hill, you know, Sam McKinnon. I mean, that list of names goes on and on and on. Derek Rucker, John Riley, you know, Ricky Gray, man, the league was really good.
Yeah, the guys that set for the foundation for the guys like Patty Mills going forward. Like,
so it was a lot of talent in the league. You know, a lot of players in this league that could have played in the NBA. some that did play in the NBA. So my time here, it was a great place for me to come at the end of my career, because I felt like there was no pressure for me to go out and score 20 or 30 every night. I could just come and fit in and be part of a team. And that's what I was looking for towards the end of my career, man. Australia became like a second home for me. You know, I still have lifelong friends that are here, and I still get back to Australia at least once a year to be able to connect with the game here. So I feel like I'm still part of the NBL in some way.
Great to hear. So following your playing career, you got into coaching. How did that happen, and how did you get from where you started to where you are today? Obviously a big question there.
Yeah, you know, when I retired, you know, I started, oddly enough, a lot of people don't know, the very first training session that I ever did was here in Australia. And I was still playing. I was playing for the West Sydney Razorbacks, and I had a couple of the families that were fans. You know, they were big supporters of the team. One of the sponsors, his son was about 12 years old, and he was a really good player. And he just asked me one day, he said, you know, would you mind working my son out, you know, teaching him some things? And I remember the first day I went to the gym with that kid. It was one of our off days, our practice. I remember when I was done, man, the feeling that I had of working with him was I knew that was something I wanted to do.
Yeah, you wanted to pursue this.
When I was like, man, I want to do this more, because the engagement that I had with the kid, just watching him, the light bulb in his head go off, watching him like really want to work on his skills and get better, and spending that time with him, man, it was an incredible feeling. So that was kind of like the beginning. And then when I did retire in 2003, you know, I knew I didn't want to do a 9-to-5. Basketball had been my life for years. So for me, it was really more just like, how can I stay connected to the game? And the training industry back then, there was no training industry. You know, back at that time, there weren't skill development and the whole industry of basketball training. And I just knew that I wanted to be able to impact players and athletes through the game of basketball and teach and share what I knew to be able to help young athletes, whether it be make their high school basketball team or get a college scholarship. You know, it just really came from a place of I wanted to help athletes get better with the game of basketball, and that was the beginning of it, and it just morphed. When I say it morphed into a business, it really took off and had very organic growth. I really dove into it. I studied the game. I came up with a whole training philosophy of how I wanted to train athletes, and here we are. Right. You know, 2022. Yeah, I mean, I did that for a betterment of about 10 years before I became an NBA coach, and I started training, you know, NBA players. I started training just about every major university in the Northern California area. I started working with national teams. I was working with the Japanese national team. I started training players from Australia and Croatia and India, and it just kind of really just took a life of its own because I really loved what I was doing, and I just committed myself to it fully.
So you're obviously involved in a lot of player development coaching. What do you look for in players from a mindset point of view or mentality?
You know, for me, I think the biggest thing with athletes is just do you have the willingness to get better, right? Are you willing to be uncomfortable and improve your skills? I don't care where you are in terms of your level of play, male, female, young kid, high school, college, pro. My mindset is if you're willing to get better, if you're willing to push yourself and be uncomfortable, then we can improve. And so I'm always looking at athletes from that point of view of are they open to pushing themselves outside of their comfort zone?
Obviously, like you mentioned, player development's come a huge way, and the game's come a huge way since you started with it. What do you see as the biggest differences and evolutions in the game and in player development from where you started?
Man, the game is just obviously the game of basketball has taken on more of an individual characteristics. You know, I think the game of basketball has always been it's always a team sport, but you see the industry of training now, that's a $1 billion industry now. And you have trainers all over the world who are trying to share their knowledge and teach the game of basketball. I think the biggest growth that you see is just globally. Now, before, women's basketball wasn't as big in terms of skill development. Now it's huge. And so that's, to me, that's where you see the biggest growth of just where the game has gone globally on every level, from youth to high school, to college, to pro, male and female. And it's a community now. It's a real, it's a global community of coaches and players and trainers and athletes all over the world.
So you coach some of the top names in basketball, your Kobe's, your LeBrons, your Kyries, to name a few. What enables them to be successful at that highest level? What kind of habits, what kind of mindset are they bringing that separates them to that truly elite level?
Man, they're what you call supremely talented individuals. Mm-hmm. They have obviously God-given talent.
Yeah, the raw talent.
Raw talent is just in them, but the next thing for them is just their work ethic. Their ability to push themselves beyond where the mind thinks is incredible. And then they're just their willingness, their love for the game. You know, those athletes are just, they are in love with the process of improving.
Just that dedication.
Man, pushing themselves and going through the whole nuances of trying to master the game of basketball. I think that's one thing that I learned a lot from Kobe. And he was always really just trying to master the game. You know, chasing that goal of how do you master this game, and understanding that you can never, ever learn and know everything about the game of basketball, but the journey of it is to try to chase that. And every day you're trying to push yourself to be the best that you can be. So being able to work with those athletes, they've pushed me as a coach. You know, people think it's always the coach pushing the athlete. No, they push you as a coach to be great too, to be on top of your game and study the game. And it's one of those things where it becomes a true collaboration of great athlete, you know, with a good coach, and you're just able to build, you know, tremendous relationships through the game of basketball.
Yeah, and how important do you find that connecting with the player on an individual level? Like, obviously, I put a very strong relationship with Kyrie Irving, and how has that allowed you to connect with them and help them grow as players?
Yeah, I think that's most important. You know, the relationships that you're able to build with the athletes through the game of basketball is trust. You know, so as a coach, when you're dealing with athletes like that, the biggest thing that you can gain from them is their trust. When they know that you as a coach, the only thing you want from them is to continue to improve as an athlete, to be the best that they can be every day. And so the communication and the trust, again, I'll use that word again, that you're able to build with them on the floor allows that relationship to blossom. And I think for me, that's been everything. Every one of those athletes that I've ever worked with, you know, my success has come because I've been able to build meaningful relationships with them to where we get on the floor, they trust me, they trust that I'm going to try to give them my best every day to help them continue to improve. And I just think as coaches and trainers, that's probably one of the most important things of building real relationships with the athletes, because it allows you to go into so many other areas of just what you're doing between two people, and it becomes more than basketball. You know, at that point, it becomes really, really about building real relationships that go way beyond the game.
You had an incredibly successful run, 6 straight NBA finals, 3 championships. What are some of the moments that stand out there? I imagine the 3-1 comeback has to be up there, but others.
Man, I think that whole time, I remember going through that whole period of time, and it's unbelievable. You know, every year that we would go into the playoffs and have an opportunity to go to the finals, man, I would sit back and say, man, is this real? You know, am I really going through this part of the journey? Because I have so much respect for a lot of coaches that have coached in the NBA for 20, 30 years. And some of those coaches have never made it to the NBA finals, but they're great coaches. And it's really hard. That's a really hard accomplishment to be a part of. And I've been tremendously blessed to be a part of some really good teams and coach some really good players. So, man, it's like a drug. You know, getting to the finals and being a part of that every year, being the last 2 teams to play, you know, at the highest level of the game, there's no better feeling. You know, you look at that and say, man, okay, the work that we put in is paying off, and we're standing here with the ability to compete for a championship. And I had some incredible runs. And that run in Cleveland, you know, they were all special. You know, you look at every one of those championships and they're all historical in some kind of way. You know, we win in Cleveland, first team ever to come back from a 3-1 deficit in the finals. You know, and that's Cleveland's first championship. You know, then I go to Toronto. It's the first team outside of the United States as the NBA to win an NBA championship. Unbelievable. And then we go to the bubble. You know, it's the first ever, you know, sporting event in some kind of situation like that where you're in a bubble and we have an opportunity to capture that championship. So, man, they've all been special in some kind of way and just memorable.
Yeah, all unique in their own way.
Very, very all unique in their own way. But Cleveland's probably the one that stands out the most just because of the dynamic of it.
Yeah, and that fight back from going down.
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot of interesting things with your 94 Feet of Game coaching program. Can you tell us a bit about how that developed and the philosophy that underpins it?
Yeah, you know, that's you know, the whole 94 Feet of Game thing has been something that has been with me since going back to about 2000. And the whole concept for me behind 94 Feet of Game was really whenever a player steps on the floor, you know, the court baseline to baseline is 94 feet. And I've always wanted to help players be as complete as possible. So that was kind of my mindset behind the whole concept of the company and how you want to train. And it just really over the years, the brand has just kind of taken a life of its own in the industry of basketball. And I think my career has kind of helped put the brand into a position where it is. But more than anything, everything I try to do through 94 Feet of Game is about the culture of basketball. How can we help the culture of basketball and go, well, how can I continue to input as much knowledge as I can from the things I've learned, you know, and being able to take things from my platform and give it back to the basketball community as best as possible. And so we've been able to do camps for kids. We've been able to put together clinics for coaches. We're able to use, you know, 94 Feet of Game through the app and just every avenue that we can to put back something positive into the game of basketball. That's what the brand has been about.
Just keeping growing the game and giving back to the
That's
game.
it, man. Grow the game and, like you said, just give back to the game as much as we can.
You have a lot of great women's players coming through that 94 Feet of Game program.
Yeah.
What do you see as sort of the next steps in the evolution of the women's game, and who are you really excited to see at the next level?
Man, you know, we this last year we started a campaign, you know, the future of basketball is female, and it's really just to kind of, again, help promote these athletes because they're not women, man. They're basketball players.
Competitors.
And they are real competitors. And you know, before Cole passed, you know, this was something that he was very adamant about through his daughter, and just really trying to help promote the strength of these athletes. And so for me, you know, having the opportunity to get close and work with Jewel Lloyd, and you know, as a WNBA player, that's kind of been the spawn of it for me, and it's just kind of branched off into all the other areas of women's basketball that we can touch, the youth, you know, college athletes, other WNBA athletes, but really just trying to help promote the game and help people understand and see, man, women, they can play. They can.
The talent level,
the talent level is incredible.
And it just keeps growing and growing recently.
And
right?
it is. I think the game for them is changing. The women, you know, the athletes are now becoming they're more athletic, they're taller. The whole game for them is just taking a rapid curve. And if anybody's been paying attention to the WNBA playoffs this year, you would see some incredible athletes out there playing the game of basketball.
Yeah, and I mean, you're getting the globalization of the game that you're having on the men's side
Yes.
as well. A lot of international
Yes.
players coming in, raising that level as well. So
Yes.
and that's huge too.
Yes.
You've coached a lot of basketball through your 94 Feet of youth basketball through your 94 Feet of Game program. What advice would you give to younger players who are beginning their basketball journey?
Yeah, you know, I think I always tell the young kids, the number one thing for me is be coachable. I think if you're coachable as a young athlete, then you have the opportunity to really expand and push yourself. Obviously, you have to work on your skills and put in the time, but the biggest thing for me for young athletes is to be coachable. I think that's something that's overlooked. And being coachable allows you to understand different nuances of accountability, discipline, culture, teamwork, dealing with your teammates, all of those things kind of fit into that box. So being willing to be coachable is at the top of the list for me. The other thing for me too is for young athletes to learn how to work. What's your work ethic like? So social media, the world of social media and YouTube now, right? There's so much stuff out there that they can see. They get to see Steph, they see Kyrie, they see James Harden, they see all these guys that do all these incredible things, but they don't really understand how much work they put in. What's behind it? So I'm always telling the athletes, look, if you really want to be elite, you want to be good, you want to have an opportunity to play at other levels, then you have to put in the work and understand that work is going to be a process, right? And you got to stay committed to it, and you're going to have to keep living in that lane. If this is something that you want to do, it's not just going to fall in your lap. It's going to take a lot of work, but it's something that you ultimately end up loving to do. So it doesn't feel like work. You're just putting some time in on something that you're very.
Passion for the game. It comes naturally,
100%.
I've heard you talk a lot about how basketball can be a tool to learn skills that you can apply to your general life.
Yes.
What are some examples of that in your personal life, where you've been able to apply the lessons you learned from basketball and see success in other areas?
Yeah, I think for me, just the work ethic part, right? Commitment, being committed to what you're doing. I've always kind of used basketball as that vehicle to, again, just in other areas of your life. So when I first started with my training, that's really what it was all about, was teaching the young kids just how to have some work ethic, how to have some discipline, how to have some accountability, how to put yourself in a position where once you start something, you follow through with it, right? And I think when you go through the game of basketball as a young teenager and you learn some of these things, I think those things they automatically translate and transition into other areas of your life. To be able to be disciplined, to be able to have some accountability, and then understanding just what it means to have some work ethic. And then the other parts of building relationships, being able to work together with other people, being able to be in a setting where you have to do team building stuff. That also applies and you go to work for someone. You have to work with other people. So I think the game has all kind of things that are intertwined in there that help you with just life lessons as well, and just how you can live parts of your life through the game of basketball.
Yeah, because not every player is going to have the success that you did.
100%.
But you can 100% take those lessons to your life and have success in other areas.
Business is competitive too, right? Business, you're talking about the world of corporate. The corporate world is super competitive. So you learn how to compete in the sport of basketball. Yeah, so I think that stuff carries over. If you get into the professional world of business, it's the same concept.
Well, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Man, absolutely. Appreciate it.